going inside the issues of our community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
We won't have the ability to have the Lakota education as we know it today if we don't have the resources that are necessary to provide that.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. At a moment when campaigns and elections seem to be either in the past or the distant future, educational leaders and voters in Lakota School District in Butler County are on the eve of another vote this coming Tuesday. Over the past 20 years, Lakota has been transformed from a rural system into Ohio's 8th largest district. Almost continuous construction has produced some outstanding facilities, but continuing subdivision growth in Butler County keeps the pressure turned up for bond issues to build more space and operating levies to run the system. The proposed levy asks voters to approve 7.70 mills. This includes a 2.1 mil bond issue to build one new elementary school, or I think that's two actually, elementary schools, expand one of the high schools, create more space in the freshman high school, and repair and renovate several existing schools, and a 5.6 mil operating levy to operate the schools. For the owner of a $100,000 home, or in that area we might say for every $100,000 of value, it would increase taxes about $118 per year. Lakota schools offered essentially the same levy to voters in November. It lost by about 400 votes. I am joined this morning by three people involved with the Lakota levy issue. Kathleen Klink is the superintendent of Lakota School District. Sandy Wheatley is the president of the Lakota Board of Education. Amy Hall is a parent in Lakota who has become the spokesperson for those opposing the levy. Welcome to Newsmakers. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Pat.
Kathy, you are the superintendent. This has just been a huge growth thing. It is very unusual, in my experience anyway, to put a bond issue and an operating levy sort of bundled together. Usually I'm having to explain what both of those are, and they're separate. Why have you taken that approach, and is this essentially the same thing that was offered in November?
We've taken this approach because the community had said to us time and time again, don't come one year with a bond issue and follow it the next year with an operating levy. And legislation was passed, I think maybe in the late 1990s, to allow school districts to put them together, and that's the reason. And yes, this is essentially the same, although there are some differences.
Are they minor, or are they...
We don't have another elementary in the mix as we had originally. That's the primary difference, and we've made some other reductions.
Now, as the president of the board, Sandy, you have had to go right back to the voters.
Yes.
Was there discussion after the loss in November of delaying this, or of there have been some cuts, we can talk about those, or of making some changes before you came right back to the voters so quickly?
I think if you'd asked the board, they would tell you that it was never on our radar screen that we would go back right away in February. We had such an overwhelming response from community people saying, we've got some momentum going, we really want to come back in February, we need another chance at this, please consider this. So in considering that, we did take a look at, are there things we need to change around this, but we really believe, we know we're right on target with what we need. We've cut budget as best we can, and we knew we probably wouldn't be making any changes. What we are asking for is what we need.
I want to be clear. There have been two levies that have been defeated in 2004.
That's
that
correct.
November and
Yes.
one back in March. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. Just want to make it clear.
Yes.
Amy, why do you oppose this levy? I mean, it's one thing for people who say, you know, there's always people who vote against things, but why do you oppose this levy, and why do you think your neighbors are opposing this levy?
Well, first of all, my stance is mismanagement of funds. I have looked at the budget. I have been in this area for approximately 6 years now. My child has been in the schools for 2. And seeing the waste of money that has been there.
Do you have some concrete examples of
Yes,
that?
I have a $2.2 million administration building that could have built 30 classrooms. If they're so to the breaking point of these classrooms are overflowing, why is money being spent, $2.2 million on an administration building that could have built 30 classrooms?
Let's take that on. And by the way, I want to let people know that there is a website, yes, on Lakota.org, .com, .org, and this is one of the issues that's addressed directly on that. But what do you say to that $2.2 million for an administration building?
Well, I would say, first of all, that we had people throughout the entire community. We were not as efficient and as effective as we could be as a school district. We were using classroom space that we didn't need to use for office functions, and so by our investment of dollars, we were able to pull together the $2.2 million and not go back to the taxpayer and not use taxpayer dollars. It was dollars from interest that we had earned over time. Pull all of our people together and in effect create more than 10,000 square feet for students to use and turn offices back into needed classrooms.
So you're saying that, one, you didn't have to go back for a special levy on that. You were able to use interest money.
That's right.
And two, you were able to consolidate spaces that were
Exactly.
student use spaces. What do you say to that, Amy?
I'm at a loss.
Okay. Are there other specifics?
Yes. Actually, if you could have taken that and made 30 classrooms out of it, for the fact that you're saying you're giving $10,000, you've got a top-of-the-line media center in that, where you've got a fully studio. You've got 1,000,001 things that I am a bargain Betty. That's what I do. I look at things and figure out the best way to use them. And I don't feel, and there are other people that are out there, that you are not coming forward and you are not giving actual specifics.
So are you saying that there are facilities inside that administration center, that the technology that's there is too expensive? Is that what I was hearing you say?
I'm not saying that it's too expensive. I'm saying that what they have, that they probably got the best dollar for, that it's mismanagement of funds, that it's not needed.
That it's not needed, is your
Correct.
point. Sandy?
Well, I guess one of the things that's been really efficient about the central office is it gives us a place to have our board meetings. And with regard to the technology, which I think Ms. Hall is referring to, the sound system that's in the room where we have our board meetings, one of the challenges that we face in a community where you're 66 square miles spread out with 85,000 folks who get only a newspaper once a week in terms of a local paper is communication. And so we had been challenged in the past in broadcasting our board meetings to have good sound equipment, good communication. And I think what's happened now, we have many people who say, I watch your board meetings all the time on cable access. And the result of that sound system there has enabled us to work with our local cable access channel to create a good avenue of communication for our residents. So I think that's one advantage of that system.
Okay, Amy, I want to give you another chance here. Are there other things outside the administration building that you would like to bring up?
Well, one of the things that they're proposing is Union Elementary, to dismantle Union Elementary and to actually build a new elementary school, where they have basically they're abandoning it and they've put thousands of dollars into it. And why don't they utilize the space that's already given them? And they've put a new roof on, they've done air conditioning, they've paid expenses for that particular school.
Yeah.
And
We are not going to abandon that building. That was a conversation that we had back in March, but we realized that that building certainly can be used for many, many years. It will not be abandoned. It will remain the same Union Elementary it is. We're not rebuilding Union Elementary.
So what are you doing that maybe looks like you're rebuilding it? Is
Nothing.
that what
that
I'm...
was a conversation that was out there, that
Right.
that's one of the
Last
proposed
spring,
issues.
last
But
spring.
that's
Well,
not...
that's
It's
still
not.
But that's not part of this levy?
No, it's
No,
not
it's
at all.
not.
There are two new elementaries,
Right.
and I don't know the district like the three
Yeah.
of you do. So my questions could be clumsy here, but there are proposals for two new elementaries. Give me some sense, give our viewers some sense of the rate of growth of the number of students in the district over some period of time, whatever you have in
We've
your
been
mind.
averaging 550 students for more than 15 years.
550 per year increase.
On average. Some
Okay.
years it was 350, some years 800 students. This past year it was close to 600 students.
And what's the normal capacity of one of your elementaries?
800.
So really, at least every year and a half or 2 years, you're facing a need for a new building
We
in
are.
effect?
We are, yes.
And put that in comparison to the average, to the size of an average elementary school in the state of Ohio. It's 2.5 times the size of an any other elementary school in the state of Ohio. So we're efficiency of operation, we're building larger buildings.
Now, what about the question of, there's the bond issue side, which is about building. Then there's the Operation Levy, which is teachers, it is paper, it's all the things, it's supplies that need to operate the classroom. What about class size in Lakota? How do you compare with other school systems, and are you utilizing, maxing out the number of students that can be in a class? How's that look?
Unfortunately, because we had a hiring freeze to start this year, class size doesn't look
This
as
academic
good.
year.
This academic year, it doesn't look as favorable as it has in the past. We grew by, as I said, almost 600 students and didn't hire any new personnel, so class size has increased.
So, as I understand schools these days, it's been a long time since I was a teacher, there are actually state laws these days about, for the younger grades,
That's right.
what the size can be. What is that?
1 to 25, K through 4.
And do you meet that?
Yes, we will meet that.
You will meet that?
We do meet that,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean there aren't some class sizes that are over 25.
In some individual classrooms. Now, you said that your children have been in the schools for 2 years.
Correct.
Are they young?
I have a first grader.
They're
Yeah,
first
she's
graders.
6 years old.
And in your classroom, where your child is,
There's 23 students.
there's 23 students. So and in terms of your child's experience as a student, as a parent, I mean, the teacher, the facilities, does that line up with your expectations for
No.
a good school?
Not at all.
Why not?
Because you've got teachers that are basically having to go with the politic issue and having to worry about how they teach their children. The teacher that I had was transferred from another school. Then she comes down and she's gone from second grade down to first grade. Basically, there's not a system of evaluation. In the school system that I came from in Florida, there's actually, the teachers actually have to take those state tests, state exams, and that's actually published, their grades. I want the parents to have the opportunity, if they've had older siblings, and be able to have some say or input on where their child is placed. At this time, they don't.
We got two different things going here. How has the quality of, and the way we've fallen into measuring these things these days is on results on state tests. How does Lakota, you're the 8th largest district, largest non-urban district. How do you line up on test results?
We're rated excellent, which is the state's highest ranking. And
As a total system?
As a total system, and that's based upon the tests and the state report card, and we've had that ranking for 3 consecutive years.
So, on that sort of measure, what about evaluation of teachers? Is there a system in place to evaluate teachers?
Yes, it's part of our master contract.
So,
yes, there's a very specific system in place.
So I guess what you would say to parents, Amy, or anybody else, is if you've got to worry about a teacher, you ought to be talking to probably the principal first. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. You can talk to the principal and you can talk to the administration staff and you can go all the way up the ladder. But the fact of the matter is the teacher is the one that's there every day with your child, and it's her accountability. And
Right,
so
and-
I would like a phase on each individual teacher.
Okay. And I'm aware of time here. If this doesn't pass on Tuesday, what are the implications for the schools, the children, the teachers?
Well, they're significant, and that's a minimalist word. We're looking at another $5 million in cuts. And so we're looking at probably as many as more than 60 positions will be cut. And to frame that, take Amy's building, Hopewell Elementary, which is the building my children also went to school in, that would be a whole building worth of teachers gone, a whole building worth of staff gone. So that alone, we're looking at state minimums in terms of transportation.
And that means the bus cuts that we all saw earlier this month?
We'll go to an even deeper level. They'll go to 2 miles, anything outside of 2 miles.
I literally down to it. Are you willing to live with those kinds of cuts?
There's actually other ways you can cut. You can take $6.8 million by cutting half of the non-teaching positions.
I am out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you.
voters will decide on Tuesday. I hope people go to the polls.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. After the break, a proposal for a museum that strives to see a new perspective on the event that reshaped America.
America, before the last half of the 19th century, was a country most of us would not even recognize. Most of us today would not consider it America at all. Modern America grew from a second revolution, one that began in 1861.
Welcome back. Over the past several years, Cincinnatians have watched the development of the National Underground Railroad, and that focuses on a series of stories that sets the backdrop for the Civil War. The Civil War story itself is told in museums across the country, but how it is told depends on whether that museum is in the South or in the North and who put it together. A museum now being developed in Richmond, Virginia, tries to break through that myopia. The Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond, Virginia was a vital building block in the Confederacy's industrial base. The plan is to convert the old iron works into a modern museum that tells the story of the Civil War in a fundamentally new way. To talk about the plan for the Tredegar, I am joined by Alexander Wise, the president of the Tredegar National Civil War Foundation. Mr. Wise is in Cincinnati to take part in a special program at First Unitarian Church. Welcome to Cincinnati and welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan.
Alex, we've all been to Civil War museums. I mean, I did my graduate work at William and Mary, and there are many pieces of Civil War museums, many Civil War monuments in Virginia and North Carolina and wherever you travel in the South. And the same is true in the North. People are very interested in the Civil War. How is this museum any different than what we've already visited?
Well, Dan, the Civil War was very different depending upon whom you talk to. And people experienced it very differently. And one problem we have in understanding that event and its impact on America is that we never put all the pieces together in one place. So our construct is to tell the story from the Union perspective, from a Confederate perspective, and from an African American perspective, all in one place, and show the interconnections among those stories.
So do you feel, so it's really, I think most of us would say, oh, the Civil War, there's two sides. You're suggesting that there's three major ways to take a look at this?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, it's African Americans were not potted plants. They were actors in this story. And they had a huge stake in its outcome. But it wasn't until the middle of the war, really, until later in 1862, that the Union recognized that the war should be a war about ending slavery as well as a war about preserving the Union. And when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation and the government of the United States made that choice to incorporate the war for freedom into the war for saving the Union, then that combination was irresistible, and you know the rest of the story. They won the war.
They won. One of the things here is that you're talking about the legacy of the war.
Right.
And I know it's certainly in the case of the Freedom Center and for historians generally, historians want to make the point that history is connected to the present, that this isn't just a story about the past, but there are implications here. What would you say are the implications of the story as you're trying to tell it for American society today?
Well, first of all, Professor James McPherson of Princeton has been eloquent in making the point that before the Civil War, people said the United States are. They saw the United States as a collection of states. After the Civil War, people started saying the United States is. That's the first huge result. We became consolidated as one country indisputably, and the idea of secession has been off the table ever since. That's one. Connected to that is the notion that we're a country where you don't have to be white to be a citizen. The Civil War led to the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, ending slavery, preventing states from discriminating, that's what the Constitution says, and providing the vote to African Americans. Now, in the last 150 years, we have struggled to make these things a reality. But think about the road the Civil War set us on to being a country of inclusion. A third area is economics. The Civil War was a huge boost to the industrialization and consolidation of the American economy, and within 40 or 50 years after the Civil War, it was the leading economy in the world, surpassing England, and the Civil War had a major role in that. Finally, think of the impact of the Civil War on American culture. Think of things like Faulkner's writings. Think of Gone with the Wind. Think of Birth of a Nation. Think of Ernest J. Gaines's book, A Lesson Before Dying, The Invisible Man. All of these deal with the war or with legacies of the war with which we're still struggling. So the impact of the Civil War shapes our lives every day.
Now, this is a museum that is being developed in Richmond, Virginia, the heart of the Confederacy, the capital of the Confederacy. If this story is explored from multiple perspectives, is that going to be uncomfortable for the people of Richmond, Virginia?
I'm certain it will, and I'm certain it will be uncomfortable for everyone who goes through it. Everyone who goes through it, whether you come from the Union perspective, the Confederate perspective, the African American perspective. And by the way, very few people still have a Confederate perspective, but I mean their ancestors fought for the Confederacy. You will learn things about your own story and about the others that you didn't know. And that's what's so important, to make people think about this in a new way and to help people understand that all three of these stories are legitimate parts of a shared national heritage, and we really should embrace them all.
Now, for a place like Cincinnati, and you're in Cincinnati, and this is going to be over the Martin Luther King weekend, so a critical time when a lot of people are thinking about the significance of history, but what, other than being just, well, we're north of the Ohio River, for people in 2005, what's our connection to this story for somebody like us in Cincinnati?
Well, I think that particularly for you in Cincinnati, I mean, Cincinnati is just north of Kentucky, and which was a slave state, and Cincinnati is a place that certainly was affected very much by the struggle over slavery in this country. I mean, the first way I learned about the difficult history racially of Cincinnati was to read Beloved by Toni Morrison. And then I was reading Eric Foner's book, a great book on Reconstruction. And the newspaper in 1865 in Cincinnati said, it's great that the war has ended, but too bad the Negro has not. And that's a paraphrase. And then I know you've had a difficult struggle with racial issues in recent years. We're all dealing with the legacy of what is race, what are the issues around race in this country, and how do we tackle them? How do we make the promise of those post-Civil War amendments a reality?
And you do have a consultant on your project from Cincinnati.
Not just a consultant, but a member of our board is John Fleming, who's, I think, the founding director of the Underground Railroad Freedom Center and now the director of the Cincinnati Museum Center.
And vice president for museums at the Museum Center, and my boss, who actually is a good guy. And what is your projection about the opening of the first phase of the Tredegar Museum? When can any of us actually begin to test out your ideas here about multiple perspectives?
Our plan is to open in late spring of 2006.
So fairly soon.
Fairly soon. We'll break ground on April 22nd.
Okay. Well, good luck on the project, and we all look forward to visiting, and also good luck on your program this weekend, and hopefully we'll bring you back. We're talking about another program in this coming year. So
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for making Local 12 Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next Sunday, and have a good week. Stay right.
One of the things that I think is really exciting is telling the story from the three perspectives and really telling everybody's story, which Civil War museums haven't done in the past. We're going to be talking about women's experience in the North and South. We'll be talking about African Americans, slaves and free. We'll be talking about soldiers and generals. Everybody will find something in this exhibit to interest them.